Hello everyone, Helen here. I'm back again with just another part of our campervan trip to the Southern Hebrides in Scotland. I am actually back home now I'm recording this, but I thought I would sit in the campervan just to say hello and to say goodbye again at the end. And I'm not going to do any waffle at all at the start. I'm just going to get straight into the next bit of our trip, and I'll start off with a map and just show you where I left you last time. So we'd travelled over from the Isle of Bute to the Kintyre Peninsula, and we were down on the south coast when I last was chatting to you. So our fourth night in the van was a very stormy one. All through the night we were battered with wind and rain, and in fact in the middle of the night we decided to pull the roof back down because we were worried about it getting damaged. We were being buffeted about so much. But by the next morning, the storm had passed and the sun was out. As we often did, our first job of the morning was to seek out some public toilets. And most of the time these were clean and well appointed, and there were plenty of them. We didn't really have trouble finding them. And like this one in Southend Bay, which is also in rather a lovely location. Close to where we'd parked overnight, we'd spotted a sign to St Columba's footprints and well, so we were intrigued enough to go and take a look. I wasn't quite sure what to make of the footprints, which have got the date AD 564 engraved next to them, but it's believed that one of the footprints is genuinely about 1500 years old. St Columba did visit this part of Kintyre briefly when he was exiled from Ireland in AD 563, so who knows. The association of the well with St Columba is even more dubious though, and some think that it was just created in the 1800s to attract more visitors to this place of interest. Well, we then headed off up onto the actual Mull of Kintyre. It was quite misty and we weren't sure if we'd see anything from the top, but nothing was going to prevent us from making a pilgrimage to the place where Paul McCartney, what his song was about, Mull of Kintyre. The mist did in fact clear after a little while, and there was even some blue sky, and we could see right down to the lighthouse. Of course, it was another excuse to get my guitar out and sing the song. Here's a bit of me singing just to prove that I have now sung Mull of Kintyre on the Mull of Kintyre.
Mull of Kintyre, oh mist rolling in from the sea, my desire is always to be here, oh Mull of Kintyre. Far have I travelled and much have I seen, dark distant mountains with valleys of green, vast painted deserts, the sun sets on fire as he carries me home to the Mull of Kintyre. Mull of Kintyre.
There was no one else around, fortunately. Otherwise I'm not sure if I would have sung. Well, back in the van we drove back to Campbeltown, the place we'd visited the previous day. After exploring a bit more of the town, we rested in a lovely little cafe, the Harlequin Tea Room, which had very colourful decor, and I especially loved the cups. And I had a very nice lemon and sultana scone. We'd booked into the Machrihanish campsite for that night, and we found it to be a lovely place to stop over. Very well laid out and signposted site, with some modern facilities. Instead of having separate showers and separate toilets, there were lots of separate bathrooms. This was great, apart from the slight problem of getting constant hot water in the shower. Our pitch, which included electric hookup, had a view over the sea and looking west. So after cooking ourselves some risotto for tea, which is the recipe that I tried on our very first night in the camper van, which I did show you at some point, we sat outside to eat and watched the sun go down, and I fitted in a bit of crochet time too, until the light had gone. It felt great to be sitting there, out in the fresh air, just appreciating another of nature's wonders, and I went to bed feeling very content indeed. The next day we decided to go and visit another island, a little one called Gigha. You can see it here on the map. It's just off the west coast of Kintyre. We decided just to go as foot passengers, so we parked the van at the little ferry port and very soon boarded a ferry, and the crossing took about half an hour. After buying a bit of food at the little shop, we walked a little way to find somewhere to eat our lunch. The weather was mild and mostly sunny, so we wanted to take advantage of the chance to be outside. So, following a sign pointing to a beach, we were really delighted to come across the most perfect miniature bay with white sand and even a picnic bench. We ate a simple lunch of breadsticks, camembert cheese and a bit of fruit, and we just revelled in the beauty of this peaceful spot which we had entirely to ourselves. I was so happy there that I decided to stay while Phil went off for a walk up onto the higher ground on the island. In fact, it was very hard to drag myself away and stop taking photos when the time for the return ferry drew nearer. There were some lovely views across to the mainland, and we got to the ferry terminal in plenty of time to watch it arrive. Back in the van, we then drove towards Kennaicraig ferry terminal, where we were booked onto the evening ferry across to the Isle of Islay. We had plenty of time to stop in a lay-by on the way to make some cups of tea and soak up the view. One of the lovely things about having a camper van is that ability to just stop somewhere nice and put the kettle on. We boarded the ferry, and after having something to eat in the cafe on board, we went up on the deck to enjoy the crossing to another island that we'd never been to before. It was dark when we arrived in Port Ellen on Islay, and we had a 20-mile journey to reach the only campsite on the island, so we went straight to bed on our arrival, and I took these photos of the campsite the next morning once the sun had risen. It was a really nice campsite with good clean facilities and an on-site cafe, and I definitely recommend it as long as you don't mind communal showers. We began the day as we often did with a bit of housekeeping. Having a holiday that involves lots of beaches certainly brings a fair amount of sand and gravel into the van. And we then drove to an RSPB nature reserve at Loch Ardnave. After looking around the visitor centre, we decided to have lunch, and I made some cheese and pickle toasties for our lunch using our newest piece of camping equipment, which has the slightly strange name of Ridge Monkey. Maybe you know them. So you can see here that I buttered the outside of the slices of bread, and then I added slices of cheese and a layer of chutney, and I placed another piece of bread with the buttered side up. And it was easy to check whether one side was done by just flipping the pan and looking inside, and I can confirm that they were absolutely delicious. It was a bit rainy on that day, but we decided to go for a walk anyway and chose the RSPB's very well signposted woodland walk. So it was on with the boots and off to the woods. drove a little way from Loch Ardnave on our return to the van and found a very relaxing spot to spend the rest of the afternoon, a place called Loch Ardnave. Phil went off on a little walk around Ardnave Point while I stayed in the van to enjoy some quiet time alone. Well, apart from the company of some very vociferous sheep. And I did a bit of bird watching too. And I'm fairly sure that I spotted a bittern fishing for his tea. It was soon time to go though, and we had to go and search for an overnight spot. And we had another very bumpy drive on single-tracked roads to reach Macavay. And we found there that there was nobody else there. It was a really very, very quiet spot. And in fact, we were totally off-grid at this particular spot, which did feel a little strange. It's amazing how we've got used to being able to connect to the outside world whenever we want. And I felt a real mixture of delicious freedom and mild panic. In the morning, we had a brief walk to see the beautiful Maca beach, which was completely empty of human beings. And it was another of those moments where the cares of the world seemed hundreds of miles away. However, we needed to move on, and we headed for the nearby Kilcoman Whisky Distillery, where we'd read there was a cafe, which also meant that there would be toilets that we could use. We took the opportunity to look around the gift shop and at some of the interesting uses of whisky barrels outside the visitor centre. Although we didn't go on a distillery tour, we read about the history of this particular distillery, which calls itself a farm distillery because it grows all of its own barley. It was interesting to go and see the fields of barley with signs showing the names of the different fields and how many bottles of whisky they get from each field. We had a lovely drive then around the coast of Islay to the little town of Bowmore. The sun shone and the sea sparkled and everywhere looked just wonderful. It's a real lift to the spirits, isn't it, to be surrounded by that kind of beauty. Bowmore is a very attractive little town, and it's notable for its round church, which overlooks the main street and the loch below. It was built in 1767. Apparently it was built in this shape so that there were no corners for the devil to hide in. We came across a pizza restaurant in Bowmore, cleverly named Pizzeria, a slice of Islay, with rather a nice logo too. We were fortunate that they were opening that lunchtime, and we both chose a black and red pizza topped with black pudding, red onion chutney and goat's cheese, and it was definitely one of the best pizzas I've ever had. If you ever get the chance to go to Islay, I highly recommend this restaurant. Well, feeling very full, we got on our way again, this time heading for the Mull of Kintyre, to another RSPB nature reserve. Our full tummies were very aware of the bumpy roads, so we went at quite a leisurely pace. There weren't too many other vehicles on the road, and we enjoyed the scenery that we were passing through. Along the way, we passed an old phone box which was advertising itself as a shop, and you'll see next time that we stopped off here on the way back. After parking, we set off on a circular walk that would take us up to the American Monument and along the cliff tops of Ower. The American Monument commemorates two terrible disasters at sea that happened in 1918. The first happened when a German submarine torpedoed the SS Tuscania that was carrying over 2,000 American soldiers to Liverpool. Many lives were saved by Islay locals, but unfortunately over 200 American soldiers and 60 British crew perished. Later the same year, another American troop ship, SS Otranto, collided with another ship in a violent storm off the Ower Peninsula. Again, many men were saved, but around 500 lost their lives. The monument was erected by the American Red Cross in 1920, and I felt quite moved as I read the poignant inscriptions. It's certainly a fitting memorial for those who were lost. So we spent a little bit of time around there before we continued on our walk, and I was amazed when suddenly I realised that walking towards us was a group of very hairy feral goats. I was relieved that they weren't at all bothered by us being there, because they did have quite long horns. However, they just very peacefully walked by. We headed across the cliff tops, enjoying the views, and we could actually see all the way over to the northern coast of Northern Ireland, though my photos don't show it up very well. We decided that the car park would be an excellent place to stay, and before long all of the visitors had left and we had the place to ourselves. It was on that evening that we heard the sad news that Queen Elizabeth had died, and as the sun went down and we were treated to a beautiful sunset, it just seemed a very fitting place to be. So that was the end of our 8th day, and I'll give you the final part of our trip next time, hopefully. But I think I'm going to leave you there. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope you've enjoyed seeing what we got up to, and I'll be back again very soon. So until then, keep nice and busy, look after yourself, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.